so much, Allison, and what an honor and privilege it is. I don't know if it's a privilege to go first, but it is a privilege to be here and look out at your beautiful smiling faces. I appreciate that gracious introduction as well. I do have to make one small correction. Allison introduced me as an Emmy-nominated journalist. Here's the slight correction, and there's a point to this, I promise. This isn't to boast or hashtag humble brag, but as of 2 weeks ago, there's a slight tweak to that accreditation, and it is, I along with the team at KSL, 2 weeks ago we found out that we took the Emmy Award for a documentary. Thank you. Thank you. It was for a documentary that we're really proud of. It was a work on the refugee movement here in Utah. We followed a family as they tried to assimilate here in our community. Anyway, that was an exciting day, but I want to tell you a little bit more about that day if I can. It took place 2 weeks ago in Scottsdale, Arizona, at a fancy schmancy hotel. And the Emmy Awards, it was a regional Emmy Award for journalism. And the event itself is much like what you see on TV, the Hollywood version on TV. It's pretty fancy, a lot of sparkly dresses, very high heels, fancy hair, fancy makeup, fussy food that never ends up tasting as good as it actually looks like it is, and dudes in dapper tuxes. It was a really, really fancy event. My team hopped on a plane a couple of weeks ago, went to Arizona, kind of nervously excited to go, fingers crossed that we might see the outcome that we actually did. And my producer, Nicole, was wearing this gorgeous gown. When does a girl from Utah get to wear a gorgeous, sparkly gown, right, on a Thursday? She was really excited about that. Our photographer, Eric, he cleaned up great. He looked awesome in his tux. And there they sat at a table in a fancy banquet room in Scottsdale, Arizona. Let me tell you what I was wearing, if I can. Fashion detail, all right? I was wearing my softest, coziest pink pajamas. They were well-washed and well-worn. In fact, my daughter and I have a matching set. As she likes to say, same, same, mama, same, same. We that night were together, snuggled up in our bed, in my bed, in our matching same, same pink pajamas. My husband was on a previously scheduled fishing trip with his father that he had been really looking forward to. And I had been busy all week taping a couple extra shows than I normally do, so I felt like I was in the studio a lot. And when the date of that Emmy Award ceremony hit my calendar, I thought, oh, my husband's away. He's so excited about this fishing trip with his dad. And I know that was going to be a busy week, and I didn't feel good. I didn't want to leave my kiddos with a sitter that weekend, or even in the loving care of family members. I wanted to be the mom on the ground after such a busy week. So there we were, cuddled in our pink pajamas. We were watching Mickey Mouse Clubhouse on a Saturday night. It was really thrilling. Emmy had a tight grip. Her right hand had a tight grip on her sippy cup full of chocolate milk, her favorite beverage of choice. My left hand, admittedly, had a tight grip on my cell phone, and I was getting play-by-play text updates from my producer and my photographer, who were there at the hotel at the Emmy Award ceremony, right, hundreds of miles away. And it was interesting, because right when the text came in from my producer, Nicole, 2 words, we won, right when that text came through on my phone, it clicked, it hit me that the episode we were watching was titled, and this is not a joke, this is true, you can Google it. It was titled Mickey Mouse and the Golden Boo Boo, and it was an episode about Mickey and friends searching for a missing golden statue. Isn't that appropriate? Hello? Hello? It seemed like kind of a God wink in that moment. It truly, truly did. And the truth is, I should say this as well, my daughter's name is Emmy. So I may not have been at the award ceremony, but that night I had my favorite Emmy in my arms. Cue the ahs. Yes, yes. Now I promised there was a point to this humble brag story, but let me say this. As we set out as women and as community members to find our voice and find the courage to use it, I hope that story illustrates my first point is, you need to align your voice, whatever your voice is, wherever your voice is heard, you need to align that voice with your actions. Align your voice with your actions. Every morning, I step in front of the camera and I tell the women of Utah and beyond, tens of thousands of women, that family and motherhood matter most. And I hope, like that pink pajama night, that my actions always reflect that voice that I portray. When your actions are aligned with your principles and with your priorities, your voice is naturally stronger. I believe that. Your position is firm. When you're standing right where you're supposed to be, where you believe and where you say, that space you say matters, when you're standing there firmly and your heart is aligned with your mind and your spirit and your actions are aligned too, your words come out stronger and with more conviction. You'll be more inspired, I believe, to clearly express what you believe. I can sit in that television studio every day and proclaim family and motherhood to be of utmost importance, the most important role, because I believe that to be true. And we often say, and in this order, we often say, you talk the talk, and then you walk the walk. I like to think of that in reverse. I believe if you walk the walk, then you'll be able to more confidently talk the talk, or in this case, express your voice with conviction, with clarity, and with confidence. You need to align your voice with your actions. Another step I think we can take as women to strengthen our voice, to find our voice, to drum up courage to use our voice, is to further your voice. Let me tell you what I mean. I'm often approached by young women who want to know how to pursue a degree in communications or a future career in the communication industry. And my answer is always the same. My answer is simply to learn, to seek, to read, to ask questions, ask smart questions. And I essentially, part of my job, a large part of how I make my living is by asking questions. I ask the who, I ask the why, the where, the what. In fact, why, that's interesting. Why is probably the most popular question of this up and rising generation. We like to ask why. Why did someone do the thing that they did? Why does someone believe the things that they do? We love that question. It's a worthy question for sure, but I've found in my experience into the television industry and beyond that the most powerful question, ladies, that we can ask is actually how. As you seek to further your voice, sure, ask who, what, where, when, and why, but be sure to ask the how. That's where you will uncover depth, you will expand your own education, you'll broaden your own horizons if you seek to understand the how that's at the root of any situation. It's the question that I believe will help further your voice the very most. The next step, I believe, in discovering our voice, in strengthening our voice, is to validate your voice. To validate your voice. Sometimes it can be really scary. I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like it can be really scary to put an idea out there or to express an opinion, especially if it's not the most popular opinion in the room. With social media, I think this fear can only be amplified. There have been times when I've expressed a belief or a value or a conviction or opinion on a social media platform, and pushing post feels like you're pulling a trigger sometimes, doesn't it, to put yourself out there in that way. My experience is women in particular have a need to have our voice validated, to have our thoughts validated. There's nothing wrong with that. We respond to emotional strokes. Our voice tends to get louder and stronger if we know that other people, particularly other women, have our back, right? We love that validation. We stand up a little straighter if someone gives us a little nod or a smile. You've got this, or you're right, or I agree. And when you use your voice, when you're out there speaking passionately about the things that matter most to you, I hope you feel that validation from other people, from other women. I hope you hear that validation. I hope you sense it. But if you don't, I'm here to tell you that you can be that own voice of self-validation. You can be your own cheerleader. This was taught to me at a very, very young age. In fact, I think I was 13 or 14. And I was a student at Box Elder Junior High School up in Brigham City. That's a teeny tiny town up north for all you Utah County folks who may not know. I was a student there in junior high, and it was announced at our school that a traveling performing group known as the Young Americans were going to stop by Little Brigham City, Utah. And they traveled the country and they put on these workshops, these performance workshops. There's classes on singing and dancing and acting and stage presence. And I liked all of those things, but my friends really liked all of those things, and I really liked to be with my friends. And this workshop provided an opportunity to be with my friends and miss a couple days of school while I was at it. So sign me up, Mom. Sign me up, right? So we signed up for this performing workshop. I think it was over the course of 2 or 3 days. And it was broken down into different segments, different courses, so to speak. And you would go get instruction on how to be a better dancer, how to be a better singer. And then at the end of the 3-day workshop, there was a performance, I think in part just to prove to your parents that they didn't totally waste their money, and that you actually learned something, right, during those 3 days of study. Well, on day 2, something interesting happened. They said, hey, we're going to have a solo audition for this final performance that we're putting together through kind of our workshops, we're going to have this solo audition. And anyone who wants to come audition for a solo, come on over, sing what you got, show what you got, and we'll assign some solos for the last day. Now, I was not a vocalist by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, we'd all like to think we are, right? We'd all like to think we were Celine Dion in the shower. But I really couldn't sing all that well. My friends could. They were fabulous. So my friends, you can see a pattern here, decided to try out for the solos, and I jumped off that cliff with them and stepped in front of these performers to try out for these solos. Well, to my absolute horror, and I'm talking horror with a capital H, I got a solo. I got a solo for that final performance that very next day, and I was just sick to my stomach. I was ill about it. And it was nothing fancy. It was like a little two-line, nothing, right, that I just had to get up and sing on the stage at Box Elder Junior High School. But you would have thought, speaking of Emmy, you would have thought I was preparing for some Emmy Award-winning vocal performance the way I practiced. Oh, did I practice? I went home and I sang those two little bars over and over and over again. Over the course of 24 hours, I probably sang that song, I'm not even kidding, like 500 times. In fact, I was sharing this story at an event similar to this, and my sister was sitting in the front row. And at this point, she raised her hand, right? And I said, yeah. And she hollered out, I could sing it for you right now, 10 years later. I remember the song. I remember you annoying me to death with your practice that night, singing those two lines over and over. So the day of the performance came, and I got up on the stage, and I sang my little solo. And guess what? I did okay. I did okay. There wasn't a standing ovation. No one was waiting off stage to hand me the Emmy. But I did okay, and I felt really good about it. And I walked out in the foyer after the performance, as you do after these sort of events, and everyone was kind of milling and talking and laughing. And we got in the car with my parents, and we drove home. And I must have been quiet on the ride home because my mom said, what's wrong? What's wrong? Dangerous question. Because in that moment, all of the drama and emotion and buildup in my dramatic 13-year-old mind came flooding out in that small little car space. And I just started to sob, and I said, nobody told me I did a good job. And there was the vibrato, right, that I needed like 10 minutes earlier. And looking back, that's completely ridiculous because my parents are extremely supportive. They always have been. They're so validating. But what I was expressing, I think, in that moment was that the output didn't equal the input. Does that make sense? I had worked so hard and put everything I had into this silly little solo performance, and I didn't feel like the validation that I received on the other side equated my input, right? And my mom, I'll never forget it, got really quiet in the car, and she could have jumped in to stroke me and validate me and build me up and calm my hormones down and all of that good jazz like good teenage mothers do. But instead, she looked right at me, she looked me square in the eyes, and she said, you know what, Brooke? Almost agitated, maybe slightly annoyed. She said, just because you were up there tonight singing that solo, that's good job enough. Wha-bam, smack, we drove home in complete silence. And I never forgot what she said. In fact, those very words rang through my mind many, many years later when I was a brand new journalist in the KSL newsroom. Now, I grew up, I was a nerd. I was a total nerd. I grew up watching the news. That was like my bedtime story, right? The 10 o'clock news. And I looked up to women by the names of Carol Makita. This will mean nothing to you young'uns, right? It's like Carol Makita, Deanie Wimmer, Shelley Osterloh, all of these journalists that I looked up to and admired and watched for so many years. I was now working alongside these individuals. And it was a little intimidating. I was the new journalist on the totem pole, literally, and I was struggling to get my footing and to earn my place in this veteran newsroom. Well, one day there was a breaking news story in downtown Salt Lake. A fire had broke out in a building in downtown Salt Lake, and the reporter who normally would have taken that breaking news assignment was busy that day, and the backup reporter who normally would have covered the breaking news reporter was sick that day. And this list went on and on and on. Sick, absent, out of the newsroom, busy, can't handle it. And at that time in the KSL newsroom, we were kind of set up by hierarchy, which looking back was really cruel for someone like me at the time. But you had your anchors, your Dick Norris, Carol Makita, veteran anchors over here, and you had your newbie reporters, Brooke Walker, sitting over there. So I could see my news director physically ticking down the line. Carol can't do it. She's working on a religion report. Dick has to anchor the 5 o'clock news. Down, 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 down. And there I was, right at the end, waiting, eager beaver, so excited. And he looked at me and he said, and I'll never forget these words either, he said, "Kid, can you do it?" Ouch. And I looked at him and said, "Oh, I can do it. We're fine. I've got this." Up until now, I'd never done breaking news. I've got this. I was 21 years old. I was finishing my education at BYU. This was a little over my head. But I said, we've got this. I've got it. We're good. He said, great, because I'd like you to lead the 5 o'clock news. And it was 4:48. So we hop in a live news truck parked out front of the building. I grabbed my coat, I stopped in the bathroom to throw up on my way out the door, and then we drove downtown to this fire, this breaking news scene. I grabbed the battalion chief, we did an interview at the top of the 5 o'clock as I was assigned, and guess what? I did okay. The microphone handshaking was kept to a minimum. I'm pretty sure I was speaking English. That's always a good quality, right, for a journalist to accomplish. We got out the news report. It went really well. We did another hit for the 6 o'clock news, and then we wrapped up, packed up, and went back to the station. Now, as I walked in the station that day, it wasn't like I was expecting, the Mormon Tabernacle Choir to break out in the Hallelujah chorus, right? It wasn't like I was expecting thundering applause to take over the KSL newsroom that night as we came back from our breaking news story. But all of those journalists who I named earlier had been so supportive and so validating of my effort and my work thus far. And I knew they knew that it would be a big deal. That was a big accomplishment to knock out, with some success, I thought, my first breaking news story. Well, that day, not one person said one thing to me. And you can imagine how the insecurities started to play and take hold, right? And I went home. I drove back to my little apartment in Provo that night feeling really dejected. And what had happened looking back is another story had broke in the time it took us just to drive back to the station. It was bigger, it was better, and my big breaking news fire at 5 had long been forgotten. But in my head, I'm just going over what I could have done better, what I might have done wrong, why I wasn't getting those strokes or that validation that I felt like I had worked so hard to earn. And it was in that moment that my mom's words came back into my mind when she said, just because they trusted you to send you out there in the first place, that's good job enough. As I said, I hope when you express your opinions and your voice and your thoughts that you are validated and stroked by all of the women and all of the people around you. But if you aren't, know that you have the ability to turn inside and self-validate and build yourself up from the inside out, knowing that your voice is important and knowing that you have something to contribute to the conversation at large. Validate your voice. The fourth and final piece of advice that I'll share with you today in our quest to discover our voice and to have courage in using it is to share your voice. We've all heard that saying, practice makes perfect, right? No one can attest to that more than Miss Jenny Oakes-Baker sitting right here. That practice, though, has to start somewhere. Start exercising your voice. Speak up, speak out, share your ideas, share your opinions, and share your heart, because I believe the more that you use your voice, the stronger it will become. I'm curious to know if anyone has a birthday today. Or if anyone had a Who? What's her name? Yell it loud. Yesterday, what's your name? Callie? Kelly. Did I get it? Kelly. Let's see just what happens. Go with me here. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Kelly. Happy birthday to you. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Kelly's probably regretting the minute that she put her hand in the air. I do that just to illustrate I was one voice that started a swelling chorus. Share your voice, ladies. Share your voice. If you're in a restaurant and that same exercise happens, one person starts singing, take notice of what happens. All of a sudden, your neighbor's singing, and the person next to you is singing, the person down the aisle is singing, until we have a whole chorus swell. But it does take one person to speak out and to be heard. So as we strive to find our voices, to find the courage to use them, align your voice with your action. Make sure you are walking the walk as you talk the talk. Further your voice, ask good questions, seek to understand, be a lifelong learner, continue your education in everything that you do. Validate your voice. Know that you may have to turn inside and cheer yourself on, and that's okay. If someone's not doing it for you, you have the capability to cheer yourself on and validate your voice from the inside out. And share your voice, put in the practice as you share your thoughts, opinions, and most of all, your heart. And that voice will become stronger, it will become more confident, and it will become more clear. Thank you so much.